Gazing through the lone porthole, the crew were met with infinite darkness. But that didn't dampen the excitement of the 5 people on board. As the sub plunged further into the freezing abyss toward the wreckage of the Titanic, the pressure on the hull mounted. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the vessel. Then the sound of cracking filled the air. Before anyone could react, the sub imploded. It was over in an instant. In today's episode of the Infographics Show, we'll look at the shocking revelations of the OceanGate investigation and the loss of the Titan submersible. At a depth of around 3,300 meters, the external pressure on the Titan would have been an astounding 4,900 pounds per square inch. Disaster would have likely started with the collapse of a miniature cavity inside the tightly woven layers of carbon fiber making up the hull of the submarine. This small void, and many more like it, would have been only big enough to be spotted on a microscope. It was a manufacturing defect OceanGate were likely to be aware of, and yet continued to use their non-independently inspected submersible to take people down to crushing depths. Immediate and catastrophic structural collapse followed, microscopic cracks radiating from the initial point of collapse all around the carbon fiber hull. Propagating faster than the speed of sound, the crew inside would still have no clue what was happening. Nearly 5,000 pounds per square inch of water pressure pushed against those cracks, shattering the hull. Nanoseconds later, the titanium cap at the front of the submersible is popped off like a wine cork. The crushing depths work most at the front of the hull, where the titanium cap is now missing. The walls collapse inward, and then down toward the rear of the submersible, where the aft titanium cap remains attached and maintains structural integrity. The incredible pressure of the ocean water compresses the atmosphere of the submarine, traveling along the hull in fractions of a nanosecond. Inside, the compressing atmosphere also works on the body of the crew, forcing them down away from the point of collapse towards the rear titanium cap. 5 adult humans are pushed against each other and the titanium cap with so much force that their bodies begin to burst open. The water is now pushing the hull of the submarine in on itself from the front to the back, collapsing it like an empty soda can being stomped flat. The shattered remnants of the carbon fiber hull force the crew's body up against the aft titanium cap, with water quickly following. The crew's remains are liquefied into a thick whitish paste that lines the rear of the Titan. Nothing solid remains, not even teeth. It's all over in a fraction of a second, but slowing time down lets us appreciate the horrible scale of the Titan disaster. And the Coast Guard now knows who's to blame, and while the previous scenario is only speculation, it is a very good guess as to what went wrong. The Titan submersible and OceanGate, the venture responsible for ferrying tourists to the wreck of the Titanic, was largely the brainchild of libertarian billionaire Stockton Rush. Rush formed OceanGate back in 2009, believing that underwater tourism was an untapped potential. There was just one problem: government regulation, which he deemed understandable but illogical. Critical of the Passenger Vessel Safety Act of 1993, which prevented dives below 150 feet and heavily regulated the construction of passenger submersibles, Rush would say it, quote, needlessly prioritized passenger safety over commercial innovation. Rush would design his own submersible, despite what the regulations said. The Titan would consist of 2 titanium end caps with a wall thickness of 3¼ inch. The forward end cap would have the only viewport, from which tourists could marvel at the wreck of the Titanic. The acrylic window would be 7 inches thick, and during deep dives it was recorded as protruding back into the cabin by nearly an inch. Trouble was already brewing from the design phase, though, as the viewport was only rated to dive up to 650 meters, well short of the 3,800 meters where the Titanic lay. But that wasn't the only critical design flaw. Rush believed that innovation was the key to success. Thus, OceanGate was staffed largely with recent graduates who shared his laissez-faire attitude about government regulations. Rush said he wanted a young, inspirational team who would innovate and dream big, rather than hiring experienced submariners with decades of experience operating and building submersible vehicles. Probably because one of these veterans would have immediately told him to cancel one of the most controversial aspects of the Titan. The Titan would make use of carbon fiber material for its hull, which would revolutionize its manufacturing. Carbon fiber is made from thin filaments of carbon atoms bonded together into a crystalline structure and has proven to be amazingly strong and durable material. However, context is king, and as every applied sciences student knows, materials behave differently in different environments. Rush would be warned against using carbon fiber in the hull by Dewar Marine's president Liz Taylor. She warned that carbon fiber doesn't do well when exposed to extreme depths or submerged in water for long periods of time. It also doesn't tolerate the specific stresses of having the ocean press in on it from all sides while filled with 1 atmosphere of pressure in its hollow interior. Rush waved the concerns away, even when a letter was drafted by 38 experts imploring him to have his submersible inspected by government inspectors. He ignored it. In 2019, OceanGate responded to the letter by stating, quote, "The vast majority of marine and aviation accidents are the result of operator error, not mechanical failure." Most baffling of all, the Titan was not equipped with an emergency locator beacon, which would make it easy to find should something go wrong. And this is why it took so long to actually locate the wreckage. During an incident in 2022, the surface vessel lost track of the Titan for over 5 hours, during which the crew of the ship shut off the internet to keep anyone from tweeting about it. The submersible wasn't even guaranteed to find the Titanic. Simpsons showrunner Mike Reiss stated that it took 3 hours to actually find the wreckage during one dive, despite having landed within 500 yards of it. OceanGate would claim the Titan was built in collaboration with experts from NASA, Boeing, and the University of Washington. All 3 of those entities would clarify that they had no direct involvement in the designing of the Titan, although a scale model of the pressure vessel was built and tested at the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory without any involvement by staff. Boeing also denied any involvement, and leaked documents would verify that any cooperation was terminated due to Rush ignoring recommendations and testing requirements from Boeing engineers. The carbon fiber hull, a hugely controversial part of the construction, was also never subjected to any rigorous testing. OceanGate would claim instead that it would rely on a real-time acoustic monitoring system, which was probably a big help for the crew when the Titan ultimately imploded faster than it took for an alarm signal to go off. An operations director raising concerns over the lack of testing and design of various elements would ultimately be fired. In 2018, Rush would descend to 4,000 meters on board the Titan on a solo trip, becoming the second human after James Cameron to descend that deep. In 2019, a crew of 4 would descend to almost 3,400 meters, but during the dive, there would be very loud cracking noises coming from the hull. Carl Stanley, a passenger on board at the time, raised concerns with Rush, stating that he believed that the hull had a serious flaw or a defect and that it was starting to break down. He warned that it could fail catastrophically. Rush would dismiss Stanley's suggestions and tell him to keep his opinions to himself. A new hull would be constructed in 2021, with Rush lying to investors about the delay. During the testing of the new hull design, several scale models imploded. Rush insisted on reusing parts of those imploded models for the real thing, despite a stream of warnings that the components could be compromised and weaken the integrity of the new hull. Lifting rings to aid in the recovery of the Titan were also added, and this was despite further warnings that the submarine's body was not capable of handling the tension and the load stress that it would have to bear when lifted. Communication problems during test dives were frequent, with the sub losing all contact for hours at a time with its tender ship above. Thruster and buoyancy issues also plagued the Titan. And during a 2021 test dive with TV host Josh Gates, the Titan only made it 30 meters before multiple technical failures forced a cancellation of the dive. Gates would decline an invitation to join the Titan on a dive to the wreckage of the Titanic. Stockton Rush's disregard for government regulation and cowboy attitude had set the stage for a disaster. So, what exactly happened? On a previous expedition, the submersible and the skiff it was being towed on were partially submerged for 3 days as it was dragged out to the dive site. On another occasion, just days before the fateful dive, the Titan was stuck in a high sea state, battering the crew around for almost an hour. Despite this, on June 17th, the Titan passengers underwent a day of training in preparation for their dive, unaware of the fate that awaited them. On June 18th at 9:14 a.m., the Titan disengaged from its support platform and began its long dive to the wreck of the Titanic. The Titan did not have hardline communications with its tender vessel, the Polar Prince, and instead relied on a text messaging application. At 165 meters, the Polar Prince sent a K message to the Titan per OceanGate procedures. This meant a comms check. Almost a minute later, the Titan responded with K as well. Other than the text messaging system, the Titan also relayed constant pings to the Polar Prince every 5 to 10 seconds. This system would continue operating even during most communication failures in previous dives. As the Titan continued its dive, everything appeared to be going well, though a communications failure arose around 10 a.m., with the Polar Prince repeatedly texting the Titan with no response. At 10:13, the Titan finally responded, stating they had lost system and chat settings, another failure of the communication software. Here, things become curious, because the Polar Prince receives a message saying this is PH, or Paul Henri, a French Titanic expert. When asked if he could see the Polar Prince on his display, the Titan simply sent a message back again saying, "This is PH." It's possible that this communications failure meant that the Titan was not seeing the Polar Prince's messages correctly, though it's also possible that there may have been some error with the air filtration system, leading to confusion from carbon dioxide buildup. At this moment, both ideas remain purely speculative. At 10:47, the first sign of trouble arose. A message from the Titan read, "Dropped 2 WTS." This was likely a reference to the weights the Titan used to help it sink to the bottom of the sea. Now, at a depth of almost 3,350 meters, it's possible the Titan was releasing weights as part of its slowdown procedures. In a previous expedition on a different submersible, Stockton Rush had smashed his vessel straight into the wreck of the Andrea Doria ocean liner. 6 seconds after receiving this message, the Polar Prince stopped receiving automatic pings that it would normally get every 5 to 10 seconds. It's believed that the Titan had experienced a catastrophic implosion at this time. The crew would not have had time to react or even perceive their own deaths, with the implosion happening in fractions of a second. It is likely, though, that they probably heard the same sounds of fatigue and stress on the hull of the submersible as had been heard on previous dives. This time, though, the fatally flawed carbon fiber hull would not tolerate the pressures and cave in on itself. The story of the Titan mirrors that of the Titanic, one of extreme hubris and foolishness, in this case from Stockton Rush, who believed that he was above the petty concerns of government regulation and even advice of experts. Yet his fate and the murder of 4 of his passengers serves as a reminder that government regulation may be restricting for business, but it exists for a reason. Now go watch I Was Trapped Underwater for 3 days, or click this other video instead.